Welcome to the Los Angeles Center for Urban Natural Resources Sustainability 2015 Fellowship Seminar. Our first speaker is Mark Jackson, meteorologist in charge from the National Weather Service. He will be providing us with an update on El Nino.
So what I'm going to try to do real quickly here is give you a summary of where we're at right now with El Nino. First of all, how we define what El Nino is, and then get into an outlook for what we expect for winter precipitation. And I realize winter is officially less than 3 weeks away, but what I want to do first is go over just some quick definitions. And you know, there's sort of a perception out there that El Nino is a storm. It's the actual rain that occurs. Well, El Nino is actually the phenomena of the warming and cooling of the equatorial Pacific and things that go along with that, such as the reversal of the trade winds that typically blow from east to west. Now they blow from west to east in this kind of condition when the ocean is warm. You get a piling of the water into the eastern Pacific, and so there's also pressure differences that occur across from Tahiti and everything. And so various things have to take place and be in a situation where the Climate Prediction Center can put all those pieces together and say these are El Nino conditions. So it's important to know, because people are saying, well, when is El Nino going to get here? Because of course it hasn't been raining very much, of course. And so we are in an El Nino. Just get this housekeeping out of the way. We know that it goes back to the 1800s, and it was the phenomena as the warmer water off of Peru showed up around Christmas time. The fishing industry practically collapses over December because you don't get the upwelling, and so the El Nino is the little boy, and of course the cold episode is when you get the cold water, and that's the little girl. We classify them as weak, moderate, and strong, and that holds for whether it's an El Nino or a La Nina. And of course there's neutral conditions. Each episode is about 9 to 12 months, and that's regardless of how intense it is. It's about 9 or 12 months, peaks around December, whether it's El Nino or La Nina. We've had 6 strong episodes since 1950. And you can run simulations. They've run model simulations going back before 1950. But in general, 1950 is the start time in which we've actually been classifying these episodes. So there have been 6 since 1950. Not a whole lot out of 65 years or so. From a statistical standpoint, you might think, well, I hope you're not basing your forecast based on 6 episodes out of 65. But every one of those 6 episodes behaved fairly the same way. And the last one, of course, was 97, 98. I always have to ask how many people were in Southern California in 97, 98. Okay, most of you. You probably remember what happened. I was not in Southern California. I was in Texas. And I'll tell you that the image that was portrayed by the national media, it was always houses falling into the ocean. That's how most people outside of Southern California perceive El Nino. Whether it's 97, 98, 82, 83, it's the same thing. El Ninos typically bring above average rainfall to Southern California. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not a slam dunk. Downtown LA had 34 inches in 2004, 2005. It was a weak El Nino. Since I have been here in August of 2005, so I missed that January, February of 05 with La Conchita and everything else that happened with those rains. But since I've been here, the only time that we've had above normal rainfall in Southern California was in 2010. That's when we had a strong La Nina. But they tell me that I'm bad luck up at the office because this has been the driest 10 years on record since I've been here. So I'm hoping that this winter might kind of put that myth to rest. So the latest, we're in a strong El Nino, and this is based on the ocean temperatures in the Central Pacific. So it's not based on how much rain we're getting right now. It's not based on the amount of rain we're expecting to get, but it's strictly based on ocean temperature departure from normal in Central Pacific. Considered one of the top 3 strongest since 1950. I already mentioned 1983 and 97, 98 as 2 of the, you almost could classify those as very strong, but it's accepted that we classify them as weak, moderate, strong. But those 2 really stand out. So when you consider that the fact that this episode right now is in the top 3 with those 2, then it helps put everything kind of in perspective. This is a classic pattern that you see with this strong jet stream that goes across the Pacific, bringing lots of moisture, atmospheric river or Pineapple Express, whatever you want to call it, that brings moisture into Southern California. Fairly warm and wet across the southwest U.S. all the way into southeast U.S., but then warmer and drier up in the northern part. And I think people in the northeast U.S. would be happy to know that typically in an El Nino, that it's typically pretty dry. So after Boston received record snowfall last year with the snow pile that just was barely melted away in July, they would be happy to know that typically what happens in situations that it's fairly dry in the northeast. This is where we're at right now. So the reds show sea surface temperatures departure from normal, the brighter the red. So we're about 3 degrees Celsius. Within this black box, that's considered the Nino 3.4. You divide up this area all the way from South America over to the equator into 4 regions. And this is the 3.4 region. And this is what we can do. We can look at the temperature departure from normal and see how that's varied on 3-month averages going all the way back to 1950 to classify these weak, moderate, or strong episodes. You also see the warmer water up off of California. You've heard reference to that as the blob. There's some question as to how that might affect everything. We do typically see warmer water along the coast of California with these El Nino episodes. We've seen lots of different ocean species this far north. But again, there is some question how that might either hinder or enhance this El Nino. This is how it compares to 97, and this is actually a satellite sea surface elevation departure from normal from first the TOPEX, the NASA TOPEX satellite, and then the JASON 2. And this is 97, November 19th. This is November 18th, 2015. So very similar, outside of the fact that this has more of kind of this cone-shaped anomaly into South America, whereas most of this is centered on the Central Pacific, a little bit warmer water off California. So very similar. Where does this rank so far? This plot shows a 3-month average sea surface temperature anomaly in that black box. And it starts back here in March, April, May. So these are overlapping 3-month periods, March, April, May, June, and so on. And as we go up, this orange line is 97, 98. Here we are kind of in the fall, winter time. In the winter when it peaks somewhere between 2 and 2.5 degrees Celsius. This blue is 1982, 83. And here we are right now. The last one that officially came out was the August, September, October. Next week, we will have a new reading for September, October, November, so that 3-month average. I'm projecting it up here somewhere. This is not official, but I'm projecting it somewhere in this area. We've seen weekly sea surface temperature departures just between about 2.5 and 3 degrees Celsius for the last several weeks at least. So it could actually even be higher than this. So we'll wait. This is the actual prediction of what this temperature might do. And all of these, this is kind of an ensemble. Here's all of the dynamical models that are run that project what that temperature might do. There's some statistical models, and then you can take the average, just an ensemble average. And there's some that actually take it off the scale, some of these models, which would be over 3, which would really kind of smash the 97, 98. And here as it peaks in the winter, this brighter yellow line, it's a little bit harder to see. What will happen is expected to happen, and it'll decrease off through the spring like what normally happens, and then cool off. And there's even some possibility we could go into a La Nina next winter. So what does this all mean for the winter? It's not easy. This is really the easiest part, is trying to understand what the ocean temperatures are doing. Now translating that into a forecast is a whole different thing. We have a forecast contest at work where each year anybody can play, if you want to call it play, and we forecast the downtown LA precipitation from like October to April, the lowest temperature and the date, and the highest rainfall amount, 24-hour rainfall amount. So we all put our head, individually, we might spin a wheel or something, but we try to look at some indicators and come up with a forecast. For last winter, my forecast was 6.11 inches. And the way I did that was, it was a highly scientific method, but it all gets down to 6.11. Our anniversary is on June 11th. And our daughter was born on November 6th, so there had to be some sort of magic behind that number. I did not win. So, but we've had an electronics technician at our office win it twice. We don't know what he does. But I sent an email out with kind of some update on some things, and I purposely only sent it to the meteorologist, and I did not include the electronic staff. I figured they didn't need to know that. So what's it all mean? We go back and we look at what happened with the last 6 episodes in downtown Los Angeles. So here are the 6 episodes along the bottom, 57, 58, 65, 66, 70, and all the way up. Here's the 91, 92, and then 97, 98. This is the average precipitation. This is October to May, which is when this typically peaks. And here's the average, just under 15 inches during that period. And here's what all of these, for downtown Los Angeles, what happened with these strong El Niños. Both 82 and 83, just over 30 inches, so about 200% of normal for 82, 83, 97, 98. As we look at where we're at right now, so this is a cumulative precipitation downtown Los Angeles starting October 1st. I've kind of highlighted the months here from October all the way to February, March, April, May. What's kind of interesting with these 6 episodes is you can see that, as an example, we have 65, 66 that shot out like a cannon in November, almost 10 inches by November. You know, almost 400% of normal precipitation for October, November. And then it just flattened out. It ended up being actually the driest of the strong El Niños. Others, in general, by this time, we've on average had about 5 inches or so above normal, but not like we had 65, 66. But the big month is February. If you see, there's more vertical lines, I think, out of anything here within February. It was the case in February 98 and also January, February of 83. And then it kind of settles out as we go. 97, 98 actually had some rainfall within May. So here we are right now. This has been, you can't see there's a jump up of 1/100 of an inch here. We started out really good back in, well, not great, but back in October. We had some rainfall downtown LA. Actually, the second highest 24-hour rainfall on record was in September with the remnants of Dolores, I believe. So we had some remnant hurricanes in July and September that produced a lot of rainfall in Southern California. October 15th, the rainfall that occurred on the Grapevine and all of the flooding, the mudslides, that was enhanced by, it was a very strong storm and the warmer waters. But here we are right now. So we're down here in the black. It's hard to see. You might have to stand up to see it. So you wonder, well, where's it at? What's going to happen? And now we're getting questions from the media. Articles are showing up in any sort of newsprint about this El Nino is a dud. So I almost can say that I kind of stay awake at night trying to worry about this. And we keep on looking at the models, and I keep on trying to see some sort of hint. I'll say that for the rest of this month, it doesn't look very good for rainfall. It's going to continue to be dry. I'd be surprised if we get much rain in December. But there's still, if you want to call it hope, because El Niños are good, they can be good. There's still hope in this month of February. Some of the past strong events and what it means across California. We've got both 92, 83, 97, 98 were wet everywhere in California. There was record snowpack in the Central Sierra on some of the snowtail sites, 200% of normal snowpack in 82, 83. But there's been a couple that were only wet for Southern California. And even 65, 66, you can look, even part of Santa Barbara County had below normal rainfall. And I just gave a talk up in Santa Maria. And it's, if there's a possibility that, as far as their El Nino preparedness and everything for the city of Santa Maria, I guess the old adage of you plan for the worst and hope for the best might work. But in any case, this is what it means for all across California. Climate Prediction Center puts together seasonal forecasts. You can look at a seasonal forecast all the way out to next fall. And what they do is they issue this monthly overlapping 3-month periods, temperature and precipitation, and they go with below, near, and above probabilities for precipitation temperature, multiple climate model ensembles that go into this whole thing. And then there's a couple of forecasters that put all this thing together, and they come up with something like this. So this is the seasonal precipitation outlook. This is December, January, February. And as you see, this shows greater than a 60% chance of above normal rainfall across this dark green area and dry to the north. Kind of a gradient as you go from south to north. We step ahead, January, February, March. Looks fairly similar. Again, focusing on the southwest U.S. down through the Rio Grande. And then as we go into February, March, April, things start to tail off a little bit. This is probably mostly the signal from February, March, and not really April. So that's the forecast. Winter impacts, multiple impacts, mostly January through March. Coastal erosion, large wave action, rip currents, of course. We know that for a fact. And the fact that our water levels are actually higher than normal right now, partially because of the piling of the water. The water is warmer. It has a little bit greater volume. And our tide predictions right now are running about 7 to 12 inches below what actually is occurring. So we do have higher water. We've had some coastal flooding episodes recently with some of the higher tides, the king tides. Flooding concerns, of course, when the storms are back-to-back, 2 to 3 storms in a week. And we're still in high fire season. I don't need to tell most of the people in this room that we're in high fire season. Our live fuel moistures are mostly under 60% right now. Our 10-hour fuels are in single digits right now. So we're still in high fire season. If we do get any more fires, then we'll have the danger of debris flows with those recent burn areas. We're still watching the Colby burn area, and we use rainfall rate thresholds that USGS provides, and we're still using, it's only grown back about 65%. This was back in October, and I doubt it's really changed much since then. So preparedness, this is a general, I know, be a weather nerd. It's cool to be a nerd. Our website, and then there's some of the things. I can honestly say that I've done one of these things on here, and that is we had a roof on our shed that was, for years and years and years, I'd put off. It was rotting, and I replaced it. So I had to protect all that junk in the shed that I won't get rid of. So El Nino and the drought. One El Nino winter won't end the drought. It's going to take multiple above normal rainfall years. And drought-stressed trees right now. We're seeing these things happen. We've had, you look back at the tree fall back in Pasadena back in July. We had the very large tree that fell down in Bel Air with the high winds and did some damage. So especially in an urban environment where the root systems aren't very deep, they're very stressed right now. And in any one of these storms that would come through, El Nino or not, you're looking at stronger winds, heavier rain, and of course that makes these trees even more vulnerable. And this is from September. I couldn't find a more recent one, but this is the tree mortality severity, and it's all through the forest. And that photo is from Cleveland National Forest. So that is of course a concern. So summary: we're in a strong El Nino. I know you can't tell because there's a lot of sun outside, but we're in a strong El Nino that should weaken through the spring. It tilts the odds that we'll have above normal rainfall. It's not a guarantee. It's only December and we're way behind, but I mean, even the Packers only had a 1% chance of winning last night, and they won, believe it or not. And I turned it off. So anyway, it's a season of storms. So it's not just one. There's not just one El Nino storm. El Nino typically brings more storms, but not necessarily stronger storms. It's just the repetition of these storms. And of course, we're still in high fire season, and we have to be careful of any post-fire debris flows. That's all I have. That's from, I forget, it's 82, 83. But anyway, we're on Twitter, and we do follow the Forest Service, and Facebook, and then our webpage.
Our second speaker is Cynthia Chavez, LA Center Fellow from California State University, Fullerton. She will be presenting pollination research at Ladera Vista Middle School.
Alrighty, hi everyone. My name is Cynthia, and like she said, I will be talking about citizen science and pollination at a local middle school in Fullerton. Now, this is a multifaceted project, so I'm going to do as best I can, facilitate it so that it makes sense. If I'm going back and forth, I promise at the end it will all wrap up and make sense, so be patient. There will be questions. So I'm going to start out with citizen science and its importance, a background on the importance of pollination and what's going on with pollinators in our area, known as colony collapse disorder. How I started this project, a little background as to some preliminary research I did, how this middle school got involved, and of course the methods, results, and future goals, because as we all know, research projects never truly end. So citizen science. Lots of us may have heard this term before, but I'm going to briefly explain what it is. As far as I'm concerned, we're all scientists at heart. We make observations and we ask questions on a daily basis. But what citizen science does, it enables the everyday person in the community to become a true scientist for the day. By By this, I mean giving them whatever sorts of tools or training or facilitating them to make observations in a more scientific way to ask a specific question. It's been going on for quite some time. We've probably all heard of Audubon Society. They do a winter bird count where local birders go out into various areas and simply make observations and bird counts and enter these observations online so that ornithologists know what birds are in the area. The Xerces Society is very popular for doing similar things with butterfly counts and pollinator counts. And National Geographic has been getting involved as well. This is important because although they're not a professional scientist, biologists or entomologists or ornithologists can't be in the field 24/7. So these sorts of observations can actually help answer important scientific questions that we do have. Now, citizen science and pollination research, I'll go into the details about how I got interested in pollination, but I wanted to touch on the Great Sunflower Project and their efforts in citizen science and pollinator studies. I was taking a quantitative methods class where we had to collect raw data from somewhere of our choice. I reached out to Gretchen LeBun, who runs the Great Sunflower Project up in San Francisco, and asked her to send me all of this raw data in the form of hundreds of Excel sheets. I went through it, took me quite some months, but I was able to look at it and decide what questions were the most important that these citizen scientists were answering in order to kind of consolidate it in a way that I could kind of revamp and use at a middle school. Now let's go back to how I got interested in pollination in the first place. I was working at a local emergency shelter that assists women and children who need a place to live while they're finding a new home. The point is they have a small urban garden on the side that you can see a picture of right here. And I was going there a couple times a week and I noticed that their cucumber plants had tons and tons of flowers, yet weren't producing any sorts of fruits. Now, in a setting like this, it's very disheartening because, we're trying to encourage healthy eating choices and encourage them to make healthy choices in an economical way. By that, I mean urban gardens and growing their own fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, to the people seeing this garden, to me, I don't think they're gonna wanna put in the effort if they're watering and buying these plants and that they're not getting any food from it. So it was a little disheartening, but I decided rather than give up on this garden, I talked to the Fullerton Arboretum and asked if I can do a research project on how to attract pollinators to these types of plants. So we started a preliminary research project at the Fullerton Arboretum. It was conducted by a quantitative methods class in the anthropology department at CSU Fullerton. What we did is set up various types of edible plants, tomatoes, cucumbers, some zucchinis, some of which need different types of pollinators in order to produce fruits. We used various methods, including 0-1 counting and continuous recording. We collected different variables, including temperature, wind speed, anything that we thought would affect the rate of pollinators visiting in this garden. We found a significant difference between the baseline visitation rate and the intervention rates, which is what could be expected after placing things like Spanish lavender and sunflowers next to edible plants. But it was still encouraging because we did have these things at Pathways of Hope. That name just came back to me. So I decided to take this project into a local middle school setting at Ladera Vista, where I was at the time doing garden tutorials with students. CSU Fullerton has a program called the Urban Agriculture Community-Based Research Experience, where students from the campus work at a few different areas in the community. My job was to work at Ladera Vista and conduct garden tutorials with these students. It's great because it gets them outside of the classroom, gets them seeing where their food comes from, gets them understanding that science can be conducted outside. It's not just in a lab setting, which could be very beneficial for STEM programs. And 48% of the students are eligible for free or reduced lunch. In my mind, and what research tells me, is that not all of these students have access, unfortunately, to the healthiest food groups. There's been other studies at Ladera Vista. One of them was understanding middle schoolers' food preference and why or how we can get them to eat more fruits and vegetables. And it did prove that participating in the garden would encourage them or their willingness to try different vegetables. Now, these tutorials, it's every Tuesday and Thursday for 20 minutes. Students have the choice, if they're doing well in all their classes, to choose an elective. So the garden tutorial is an elective. So that means if they're doing well in all their math classes, social studies, everything, and don't need extra help in those, they get to choose their tutorial. So the garden tutorial, they sign up voluntarily. At the time, we're doing different hands-on activities, simply caring for the plants, watering, weeding, harvesting, giving some of the extra food to the culinary arts class for them to use. So when the citizen science got involved, it took this garden tutorial and made it a citizen science tutorial. So we're still working in the garden with the addition of collecting pollinator. Designing the citizen science tutorial for Ladera Vista, like I said, I was already working with various groups of students, so I got to know, it took me a couple semesters, but I got the hang of working with middle schoolers. And I decided, as most of you can guess, it's not very fun when you're forcing 13-year-olds to do a particular activity. So I didn't force every single student to do a certain activity, like weed, like water, like count pollinators. I made different sorts of groups, and students were given the choice if they wanted to, just weed and take care of the garden, if they wanted to collect other sorts of variables that we were looking at, like temperature, like wind, like number of flowers blooming in their garden, if they wanted to learn how to identify a different pollinator, if they wanted to actually count the pollinators that were in the garden at that particular time. I also participated in a project learning tree workshop where they give you different sorts of resources and materials to conduct science experiments in the garden. I talked to the principal at Ladera Vista, and she loved the idea of science in the garden, so I went ahead and made a 6-week-long program for them, type of deal. And in order for Ladera Vista to get the most of it, for UACre to get the most of it, and for this study, I decided to add the component of giving them a pre and post survey. I was inspired by Dunlap Van Leer's study, The New Environmental Paradigm, where they used Likert-style questions. It started off with knowledge-based and then Likert-style opinion-based questions. They were 1 through 5 questions like, how important is sustainability at school? How important is sustainability at home? The knowledge-based ones were simply, what does CCD stand for? And they were given multiple choices and stuff like that to gauge what they already knew about certain aspects of the environment. The study was anonymous. Students were given a unique ID and took the survey on their iPad. Every student at Ladera Vista has access to an iPad during the school semester. Now, of course, if we want to get into super detailed about it, if we really wanted to, we can look at the address of the iPad, but I didn't have access to that and did it, so it was completely anonymous to me. And an incentive for them to actually turn in those parent permission slips to get them to do the survey. They were rewarded with UACre tote bag, various seeds that they can take home and plant in their own garden. And that was one of the most challenging parts of the study for me, is getting them to turn in those permission slips so they can take part in it. So every tutorial began with a 10-minute lesson on pollination. I started with explaining to them what colony collapse disorder is and why it's important. And like I said, then students were given the options as to which tasks they wanted to participate in. This included counting flowers in bloom, observing or counting pollinator presence in the garden. And in the future, I would like to go as far as to detail, like, what are these pollinators doing, but we simply did presence absence for this first one. On collecting independent variables such as temperature, cloud cover, humidity, and this is not an independent variable, it got messed up. And they also were given the chance to draw flowers in the garden. I thought this was interesting because in past garden tutorials, to me, students who are creative in that sense, when they draw something, they're able to really study it and look at the parts of it. So I thought it would help them understand pollination more, is seeing the shapes of different flowers and why they're important for pollinators. And of course, the students who want to get their hands dirty were in charge of maintenance of the garden, weeding, watering, and planting. A total of 5 lessons were given because that first one was dedicated to having them take the pre-survey. Now, the results, with a study like this, there is a lot of qualitative results that I could look at as the researcher, but let's talk about the quantitative ones first. We did find a dramatic increase in the correct answers of the knowledge-based questions. Granted, this was a 5-week study, so I think it would be really interesting if we were given the chance to give them the survey again and see how much of that information they retained. But I think in general, it tells me that they did learn something from this garden tutorial. Students understood what CCD stood for, colony collapse disorder, and students were able to name multiple pollinator species. Whereas in the pre-survey, in that part of the survey, a lot of students couldn't even name one pollinator, which I was expecting for them to just put, honeybee or something like that, but not many of them even knew what a pollinator was. And from a qualitative perspective, it's a little harder to make a graph for this or something like that, but I think it's very important. And for me, I found a higher willingness for students to answer questions as the garden tutorial continued. And I think this is because I had already been working with certain students, but I think they were more comfortable with the concept of answering scientific questions outside and not in a science class, or they just felt more in charge of their own garden and stuff like that. And their ability to share that knowledge to other garden students. So once the group got to know each other and they were all working as a team and it really took ownership over the garden. The first knowledge-based question was CCD stands for colony controlled drift when talking about pollinators. The pre-survey, 100% of the students got this question incorrect. In the post, only 5% got this question incorrect. Pollinators are important for food security. And just in case you can't see this little writing, blue means correct, red means incorrect when looking at these. So 79% of students got this correct, and it increased to 95% in the post-survey. Sunflowers help to attract bees. 58% got it correct, and it increased to 85% of the group getting this question correct. We can help native pollinators by planting plants that are rich in nectar and pollen. This increased from 63 to 84%. Now, these ones are the most interesting to me. These are from the opinion-based questions in the Likert style. Now, in order to make it quantitative, what I did is if they answered a 1 or 2, I consider that considered it weak. If they answered a 3, it was medium, and a 4 or 5 was strong. In this, red is weak, purple is medium, and blue is strong. In pre-survey, only 42% of students thought this was important, and it increased to 47%. Sustainability should be a priority at home. Only 28% of students felt strongly about this, and it increased to 42%. For me, this was the most exciting change in the pre and post survey. I'm not a parent, but after working with them and remembering how I was in middle school, this means students are taking this information home, taking the idea, and of course, sustainability is a pretty vague term, but I think we could all agree it means something positive for the environment. So this is pretty exciting because I think a middle schooler actually could control a lot of choices at home. We had a student tell me that they encourage their dad to start a compost bin for them in the backyard, or they actually use those seeds and decided to plant them, that they're trying to encourage their parents to rip out the lawn and plant, native flowers. And like I said, I'm not a parent, but I think stuff like that makes a big difference in the home when students are pushing their parents to try to do something. And after working with them, if I were their parent, I'd probably listen. And community-based research is a lot of fun because I'm not just taking this project and throwing it at the school board and saying, here you go, do this. I was in there working with them, making sure to get the ball rolling and stuff like that. But working with a school, especially a public school like Ladera Vista, does come with challenges, of course. Adjusting my citizen science schedule to their school schedule, that 5-week, I started with saying it was a 6-week program, and then I said it was 5-week, and that's because they came to me right before I started and were like, they actually have standardized testing, so can you just cut a week out? And it was kind of disheartening, but stuff happens in research. Whether it's community-based research or lab research, you have to adjust. Synchronizing plants growing in the garden with prepared lessons. I can't force tomato plants to bloom so that we can count them and see if there's pollinators coming. So just being patient, trying to hope that even though the garden's not looking exactly as I want it, that students are still getting the most out of it. Quantifying attitudes of students. I would love to do this survey again in the future and see if similar results happen, because I don't know what's happening in the students' homes, if they watched a documentary with their parents about pollination, or if that attitude actually fully came from the garden tutorial. But because of things like the 0 to 100% increase in knowledge-based cues, I do feel comfortable saying it did make a difference, but I'd like to do it again to see if there was similar results. Getting students to turn in permission slips, so like I said, that was the most challenging. Future goals, I want to share these results with the Fullerton School Board to hopefully encourage them to use the garden more. There's a lot of science teachers who, not because they don't want to, but just they have so much on their plate as it is with keeping up with certain standards that the school district has for them, don't find the time to go in the garden and teach these lessons outside in an outdoor lab. But I think with these results, hopefully we can see how valuable getting students in an outdoor research lab is. Share the data, of course, with Gretchen, the Great Sunflower Project, so that she can see how helpful all of her findings were in citizen science were to us. And design more STEM-related projects for the garden. We started doing water conservation recently after the citizen science study, where we're using a sink to wash the vegetables that are harvested to capture the water and then reuse that water so that students get the idea how important water conservation truly is. Take the students on field trips to the Fullerton Arboretum. At the end of every tutorial, I had portioned some of my stipend money to get a bus for them to visit the Fullerton Arboretum, because it's down the street and they can see that they have a small urban garden, but this can also take scale on big gardens. And implement more native landscapes in Fullerton. I have a lot of people to thank. I don't think anyone could do this type of project alone. My thesis advisor, Sarah Johnson. She's not here today, unfortunately. I wish you guys could meet her, but was a tremendous help and inspiration to me the past 2 years while working on this. Rhonda Schmalfield, the principal at Ladera Vista, who was on board with every single idea and willing to defend me at any sort of district questions they had. You know, bees are gonna sting the kids and stuff like that. You guys could probably imagine the types of worries school districts have when doing any sorts of project. And other Ladera Vista staff, the culinary arts teacher, Esmeralda Polito. Of course, the LA Center for Urban Natural Resource Sustainability, which provided me the stipend so that I couldn't get that bus for those kids to go to the Fullerton Arboretum. Andrew Shensky and Jose Zamora, undergraduates who helped me with this project. There's no way I can control that many middle schoolers in an outdoor lab on my own. So having 2 extra teacher aides, I guess you can call them, made everything very doable. The Great Sunflower Project and, of course, the Fullerton Arboretum.
Our third speaker is Jonathan Navarrete, LA Center Fellow from California State University, San Marcos. He will be providing us with a presentation on the San Gabriel River recreation users.
So the survey project, I was part of this research team from California State University of San Marcos with a partnership with the Watershed Conservation Authority, who went up to the Angeles Forest to survey visitors who recreate in or near the San Gabriel River. And the purpose of the project was to identify who the visitors are, what their recreation experiences were, identify where visitors were coming from, and identify ways of improving and promoting sustainability of the park and river. The survey site extended between Oaks Picnic Grounds, the Lower Canyon, and Heaton Flats, the Upper Canyon. This is the main entrance to accessing the river. Heaton Flats is kind of a parking structure or parking area and more of a hiking trail, access to hiking trails. So this is primarily where we serve, the Lower Canyon is primarily where we focused our forces on surveying visitors. Our survey responses were approximately a third of them were Spanish. The majority of the population of visitors there were of Hispanic and Latino background. So right away, this is pretty much a very historically non-traditional group, but not unfamiliar to a very urbanized national forest. In looking at what this majority group is doing up there, they're going up there for a variety of activities like everybody else. They want to hike, they want to spend time outside of the city, they want to spend time with their friends and family. Relaxing friends and family and recreating in or near the river are big components of their recreation experience. Within the survey, we asked visitors if they could indicate the zip code of the area of where they were coming from. Occasionally, we got visitors that were coming out of the country or out of the state, so we just asked them to indicate where the zip code of the area where they were staying at. And mapping this out, a directional ellipse surrounding the main region of where visitors are coming from. And so you have Orange County, LA, pretty self-explanatory, I guess. This directional ellipse captures approximately 68% of visitors. So this is the majority of the group. We have a couple of visitors coming from San Bernardino, Ventura County, and San Diego, but everybody's pretty much from LA and Orange County. And in presenting this map, we want to ask, why does location matter? And as leisure constraints theory dictates, there's a hierarchy to leisure, outdoor leisure recreation activities. So depending on your social location in terms of your gender, education, income, geography, you're gonna face different barriers to entrance to these outdoor leisure recreation activities. There's opportunity cost to leisure choices. Do I choose to work? Do I choose to take the day off? Destination costs, environmental questions of environmental equity and justice, and other issues of public health as well. Looking at the region in general, I'm sure most of you all know that being from LA County, so most of you probably already know this, there's a good majority of Hispanic and Latino communities in this area, and there is a significant number of households who are not proficient in the English language. When we look at locations where people are coming from, mostly everybody's coming from the LA area, Long Beach, et cetera. People are approximately driving a little bit over an hour to get to this area and approximately 42 miles to get to the recreation location. And this will occasionally fluctuate depending on holidays, traffic, et cetera. And so typically the visitor will probably drive 20, 30 minutes to Azusa and then 32 minutes to get to the San Gabriel River. So just to summarize, people are coming from densely populated areas. They're coming from Hispanic neighborhoods and locations where there are issues of poverty, low SES, and environmentally impacted area. This measure is produced by the Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment in October 2014. And it's pretty much a mixture of different population characteristics and environmental characteristics. We can note that a majority of visitors are coming from this environmentally impacted area. So that's where the public health and environmental equity questions come into mind. So these are some of the images of people experiencing the river, and the river's great. Everybody loves it. People go up there to spend half the day or the whole day with their friends and family, church groups, and just to experience and interact with nature. And along with this interaction with nature, we have to kind of assess how is this impacting the environment. We want to have as much as open access as possible to these recreation areas and open spaces, but we also want to make sure we're not destroying them. We want to maintain the environment. And so with that in mind, there's this measure that was created by Dr. Wesley Schultz, a psychologist at Cal State San Marcos, called the INS, Inclusion of Nature and Self. And along with the survey in 2014, the surveyors asked visitors to identify their connection and experience with nature on the scale of 1 to 7, where 1 means, pretty separated with nature, don't really care about nature, don't care about being here, and 7 being the opposite of that, very intertwined with this natural experience. And we see kind of a homogeneous trend across all groups. for the most part, people are indicating a moderate to strong relationship with nature in their recreation experience. So in talking about trying to promote sustainability and of the park and river, it really starts kind of at home. How do people connect with nature? If you're feeling fairly disconnected with something, are you going to necessarily have that prevalence to want to protect it? Wesley Schultz argues that if people exhibit an intrinsic connection with nature, there's the opportunity there to cultivate pro-environmental behavior. It's just a matter of finding strategies to cultivate this. And while the survey project was up at the San Gabriel River, there was an educational component that came along with that to try to cultivate some environmental behavior, handing out trash bags, handing out educational material to children and families. Unfortunately, can't present that information at this time because of certain questions of the data. However, we can have conversations about diversity, sustainability, and urban development at home. Good manners kind of start at home, right? So there's currently a researcher, Cynthia Chavez, who works at the Pacific Southwest Research Station, who has come out with a couple of publications, who has tried to answer some of these questions, or kind of instigate, or maybe not instigate, but promote this conversation of how we interact, how park management can better interact with a non-traditional group, especially as California demographics are increasingly shifting to a more diverse group. And also, how can we, if individuals are experiencing a close connection with nature and maintain that, how do we best cultivate that connection with nature? Again, when there's a connection with nature, we can cultivate caring for nature and a commitment to protecting nature. With people coming from a highly urbanized area, how can city development promote pro-environmental behavior? And do people feel a detachment at home when they're surrounded by concrete buildings, smog, traffic, etc.? And so at this time, I'd like to open up to anybody who has any questions. This is kind of meant to be a little open-ended and more of a conversation with you all.
The Los Angeles Center for Urban Natural Resources Sustainability would like to thank you for watching this video, our 2015 fellowship seminar.